covering the industry as we do here, our team has a little list of automakers who we think are not going to make it through the year. Sometimes we're proven wrong and sometimes we're proven right. And last year, Byton was on the won't make it list. Yet it technically made it through the year, albeit in low power hibernation mode. But now it could be about to wake back up. According to a statement issued on Monday this week, the Nanjing Economic and Technological Development Zone in Nanjing, China, along with Byton and manufacturing specialists Foxconn, have announced that they will be working together to build electric vehicles in Nanjing from next year. While the official statement on the agreement isn't that big on details, Bloomberg cited an anonymous source close to the deal that stated Foxconn's listed company, that's Honghai Precision Industry Co., will invest a total of $200 million in Byton, something that's a much-needed cash injection for a company that's almost been dormant for the last 6 months or so. Late last year, Foxconn announced its own foray into electric vehicles, announcing in October that it would be bringing a new open vehicle platform to market, in addition to promising a modular chassis and a modular battery system that could accommodate a wide range of drive-by-wire designs and powertrains. Foxconn said it wanted to open up a digital ecosystem that would make it easier for people to code for electric vehicles. The platform it promised, and the development platform, would allow everyone from automakers to independent developers to build new, exciting features for next-generation electric vehicles without of the worries associated with normal electric car security systems. The tie-in with Byton and the Nanjing Economic and Technological Development Zone will actually mean the car that's being talked about is the M-Byte, a car that will finally be able to go on sale, in China at least, next year. But will it? And will it go on sale elsewhere in the world? Let's look at that. First, let's deal with the thing I know that you all know by now. The history books are littered with names of companies that have tried and failed to bring new electric vehicles to market. Sometimes those companies crash and burn in spectacularly short order. Sometimes they take a long time to die. And I'm not going to beat about the bush. In Byton's case, I've been convinced for more than a year that its chances of entering onto the market were and are pretty slim. Why? The Byton M-Byte has always felt overly tech-centric, and from the drive that my colleague Kate Wharton-Elliott had this time last year in a prototype M-Byte at CES 2020, not to mention the ride-along that I had, made us feel that the M-Byte didn't feel particularly finished or refined from a driving standpoint. Granted, it was a prototype, but it was being presented as more. And the focus on the immersive in-car experience, which included not only the massive curved door-to-door LCD screen in place of a conventional dashboard, but also a screen embedded into the freaking steering wheel, made it feel like it was more destined to be a 1%er car than a daily driver for the masses. Then there was a huge amount of hype over the car's capabilities, with a marketing effort that seemed less interested in the nuts and the bolts and the engineering, and more about vague claims and touchy-feelies. In many ways, Byton reminded me, and still does, of Faraday Future. Byton, of course, had its financial concerns too. It seemed to spend much of last year with bank problems, and by the time July came along, a large number of its staff had even left. It lost both of its founders, which is never a good thing, and while one of the founders, Carsten Breitfeld, later claimed he left because of pressure from the Chinese government through one of its investors, FAW, his departure certainly negatively affected the company's image in the West. And when Byton shuttered its plants for its production facility in Nanjing, something that some analysts have called an albatross around the company's corporate neck, things didn't get better. That factory, which Byton borrowed heavily in order to build, reached a point where some prototype vehicles were being made. I've heard a figure of around 200 cars quoted by various news sites. But while the facility was closing in on series production, those cars were not series production vehicles, and the restructuring that it went into in July last year, a restructuring that left the company operating on a very thin skeleton staff, seemed to essentially put production plans on a permanent hold. A side note, because I do feel it's important to note here for context, and I will admit it might be impacting my feelings about Byton, but it also explains why I have felt it's had financial woes for a while. At CES last year, just before the Byton press event, I fell off a media riser that had been incorrectly set up by Byton's hired-in media team. The too long didn't read was that the lighting was poor, and instead of the usual reflective tape to denote the edge of the riser, there was none, and I fell backwards and sideways, which hurt my side and put me onto crutches for much of the event and significant amounts of pain meds when I needed to stand upright on camera for something. It ultimately resulted in a couple of $1,000s of medical bills, and despite trying to claim that back from both Byton and Mandalay Bay, so far I've got nowhere. Anyway, back to Byton and the new deal announced with Foxconn. The cash injection that Byton appears to be getting from Foxconn isn't insignificant, and it should help Byton get its M-Byte closer to production, but it's not clear if Byton's facilities in Germany and the US, which I believe are still operating to some extent, will get any of that money. And I say that because right now, all of my previous contacts at Byton have left, and it's pretty much like Tesla. It's impossible to get a hold of anyone at the company right now, so if I do eventually get hold of someone at Byton and I can actually clear some of this up, you'll be the first to know. I think what's more likely right now is that the cash injections will be focused on Chinese operations, where Foxconn is set to help Byton build a production facility. It's not clear if the deal will allow Byton to resume production at its existing facility, the one which effectively halted everything in June, or if there's going to be a new facility opened. But since we're talking about China, either is technically possible. As The Verge reported earlier this week, Byton's financial woes last year ran deep. It's pretty much blown its entire budget on getting that factory up and running, and when COVID-19 hit and lockdowns began, it had no money left to do anything. At the tail end of last year, it was even allegedly running out of money to pay its legal team, who have been trying to win a court case against one of Byton's founders. And therein lies another rub. If you're going to bring the band back together, as it were, to get the M-Byte back into a more stable footing, you need a full team of engineers, executives, and production staff. Add in legal counsel and all of the other roles that would be required in most mainstream automakers, and you're looking at salary commitments that are into the millions of dollars per year. One estimate I saw from Autoblog a few years ago stated that you would need literally hundreds of millions of dollars to fully staff a new vehicle production. Granted, if Byton was at production intent prototypes, which I don't think it was, the salary requirements might be less in the short term, but I can't see $200 million going very far. So what's really going on? If I had to guess, this is more about Foxconn than it is about Byton. Byton is a startup that's already done substantial work on vehicle design and engineering, and Foxconn wants in on the EV space. It also has its own in-house EV engineering team. But what Foxconn has that Byton does not is years and years of high-volume electronics manufacturing experience. It's going to find it relatively easy to produce all of the electronics components that Byton needs at very low cost, from that crazy 48-inch door-to-door screen all the way down to the battery packs and power electronics. And while I am speculating here, I'd not be surprised if Byton would sign over some of its IP to Foxconn in the process of all of this. During its presentation last year on its new electric vehicle platform, Foxconn had a lot to say, but not a lot to show. We didn't really see anything at all about the vehicle it developed, only heard about the software and hardware behind it. Its technology plus Byton's IP could be a good marriage, at least in the short term, but I don't believe that this will be Foxconn's route into the EV world. There are far more proven routes that it could take, such as partnerships with any of the number of automakers already producing large numbers of electric vehicles in China. Personally, I don't believe Byton will resurrect itself from the dead. There are just too many hurdles that lie ahead of it, not to mention what is now a very negative reputation. And in a post-COVID world, I suspect luxury electric cars won't be quite as prized as affordable ones for everyday people. especially if incentive programs in the US and Europe turn their attention to eliminating fossil fuel cars rather than subsidizing 1%ers and their EVs. Finally, I think it's worth remembering something very important about both electric car startups and Chinese electric car startups in particular. There's a big trend that results in inflated claims on top of very little substance underneath. And while it's not just Chinese startups, I mean, just look at a certain Arizona-based truck company, it means that the more a company screams and shouts about its revolutionary new technology, and the longer it takes to show you it, and the less it lets journalists talk to the engineers and the designers behind the vehicle, the less likely it actually has something special. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons: John Lyons, Regine Fellows, Jeffrey Songster, Anonymous Freak, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters: Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Sean Ueda, Will Graylin, and Ian. You can join all of these amazing Patreon supporters by following one of the links below, or you can send us a donation through Ko-fi or Bitcoin. You'll also find a link to our free Discord server, so if you haven't, sign up and come and join in the fun. And if you're in need of some swag, don't forget to check out our merch over at Redbubble. After you've finished seeing all the scrolling names, you'll see a suggestion for a new video to watch, so please do consider watching it if you haven't, and I will be back very soon. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!